My name is Dick Fleming. And during the Vietnam War, I was a member of a reconnaissance team with 1st Force Recon, Recon Battalion. And I've written my stories about my time in the military and in Vietnam in my book called Chasing Charlie, which is available on Amazon and also on my website, firstforcerecon.com, which has resources about the recon community and photographs of my time in country, and also photographs people have sent to me over the years. So that's might be a resource you'd be interested in. My story today is about a search and rescue mission that our team went on. During the briefing, we were told that a helicopter carrying 5 Marines on transit from one fire base to another had disappeared into the jungles in the north central highlands, very mountainous terrain. And after an extensive air search had failed to locate the plane, the C-46, the helicopter, that we were going to go in and see if we could find it on a ground search, the most likely location that it had gone down. So we were told by our captain that no American had been in that area before. It was mountainous terrain again, and there was very little information about what we would find there. Well, this is one mission that we were determined to do our best to make sure that we covered the ground and made every effort to find those guys. I think I can speak for myself and the rest of the team when I say that we were determined to do the best job that we could. And so we loaded onto our helicopter and were inserted into an old rice paddy at the base of a steep plateau that overlooked a valley that we had very little information on. The captain told us that even the maps in that area were not that accurate. So we exited the helicopter and started working our way up that slope toward the top of that plateau where we thought we could set up an observation point. And as we moved for a few hours, still climbing, moving up higher and higher, we came to a road, and this was unusual. I had never came to a road before like this. It had been actually cut into the side of the hill and wound its way up to the top, and probably had been built during the French occupation of Indochina. And that had taken place decades before. The French eventually lost the war at Dien Bien Phu, and the road seemed that had been fallen into disuse. But normally we wouldn't have followed a trail or a road, but in this case we were determined to try to cover as much ground as possible, as quickly as possible, to get back to these guys on the ground and get them out of there. So we followed the road and climbed very quickly higher and higher. I was following Bo, and he suddenly gave this strange signal, well, like this to me, and stop. So, well, what in the world is that? What was this signal? It was new to me. Well, I stopped, and I watched as he went up the road a few more feet, and then carefully circled around the outside of the road and continued along. Well, I couldn't see anything. I went up carefully closer, and I'm looking in the distance toward Bo. And it's funny, the way your eyes, you're focusing on the distance, you don't see what's really in front of you. And I darn near walked right into this spider web with this huge spider right in the center of it. This spider was like a child's nightmare of what a spider would be. It was about the size of a dinner plate, completely shiny black, except for the very tips of its feet, which were bright red, and I had little wicked eyes, black eyes looking at me, and was right in the center of the web, and it was only a couple feet away. And I was afraid it was going to spring at me. I didn't know, but it sat there. And so I very carefully went around, followed Bo around, and to the other side. And as I did so, I passed the edge of the web. And right at the edge of the web, there are hundreds of little tiny spiders, each identical to its mother, and each now scurrying toward her in the center of the web. The entire web was shaking a little bit like this. I thought for a minute, geez, this might be a new species. I've never seen any spider as big as this. I later learned that they were spiders like that in Vietnam. Bird's nest spiders, they called them, but at the time I didn't know what they were, and I was afraid they were deadly poisonous. They certainly looked like it. Well, I gave the signal back to Thurman to stop, and I went like this. And he looked at me and went like this. What is this? And I saw him walk up closely, and his eyes got really big, and he's looking at that spider, and the spider's looking at him. And he went around carefully, and we went our way up, managed to go up the trail further, the road further. And we could see that no one had been on that road for decades. I mean, it just looked so overgrown. The grass. We would have seen any indication of the NVA using it, and we didn't see anything. It looked like it had been abandoned, and we weren't sure what we would find at the top of that. When the road ended at the top of that hilltop, that plateau. So we continued along. And we got to the top. We set up an observation post overlooking the valley, and boy, it was a beautiful spot. The breeze came up from the valley, and you smelled the flowers, and just a lovely spot. And we stayed there overnight, and it seemed like there had been a French house at one point there. There was some debris. And it seemed like where we stopped, it was like a sunken area. And in my imagination, I thought it might have been an old sunken garden. But I don't know. It was a lovely spot. Could have just as well been a parade ground, for troops, for all I knew. The French were not known for their gentle attitude toward the inhabitants of the country that they were part of their colonies. Probably had hundreds of coolies waiting on them hand and foot. But in any case, in the morning we found a small trail that led down off the hilltop. We didn't see anything at night. Off the hilltop. Now, I was carrying the Unit 1, which had the medical gear in a small box like this size, clipped to my web gear. And we were hoping to use that, to give support to any people that, any Marines that we found that were injured. It had morphine in it, and it had all kinds of bandages and things like that. I had volunteered to carry this Unit 1 because we had lost our medic. We didn't have our medic anymore, and so they needed somebody to carry that first aid equipment, and I volunteered to do that. But when we started to go down that path, I regretted that decision because the path which led down the mountain was very steep, and it was not meant for a 6'1", 200-pound Marine. It was meant for someone who could fit on that path. And me, as I kept on going down, the path kept on getting steeper and steeper, and I was actually clawing at the rock face because, when I pressed myself against the rock to go sideways down this trail, which was too narrow for me to go down any other way, my back, with 100 pounds, my pack with 100 pounds of gear was actually trying to pull me over the precipice. And there was a drop of about 200 feet. It would have killed me. So I was clawing along, trying to stay on the trail and stay on that rock without falling. And of course, again, that if I had any sense, I could have unclipped that Unit 1 and push it on the back. That would enable me to get an additional foot or so to press myself against the rock face. But it was too late because I needed both hands to do that, to hold myself on there. Well, we're going along, and there was a stream that came out. It was a little waterfall that came down and had cut a gap in the trail of about a foot or two, not much, but the rocks were all slippery, and we had to step over that to continue. And again, there was a fall of 200 feet or so, so I was gathering up my courage to make that leap, to get across that gap. And I felt somebody tapping me on the back, and it was Truman. And I turned to him, and he whispered to me, "Rick, can you get my canteen and fill it up?" I said, "No, I'm not going to get your canteen and fill it up. I'm barely hanging on here as it is." And he goes, "You can do it." I go, "I'm not doing that." I said, "Why don't you just take a piss while you're at it?" And he goes, "I already did." And with that, like a monkey, he kind of leaps around me and jumps over that gap in the rock. Well, I could have killed him. I thought if really when he went around me, I was going to fall off the cliff. So I clambered after him, and we made it down to where the trail ended, and there was a nice level spot there, and we gathered our gear together, and we spent the night down there. And the next day we started moving toward the center of the valley, where the map had shown a river. And as we were moving, we stopped for a minute for a rest break at a little place where we could overlook the valley again. Lieutenant was scanning it with his binoculars. And I was leaning against one of the trees there, and I saw this movement in the grass coming toward me. And I said, "Oh, the snake." And sure enough, snake puts his head up out of the grass and gradually raises himself up. And by the time I knew I couldn't get to my feet soon enough, to avoid him. He was that close to me. He was only about 2 or 3 feet from me, and now his head was at my eye level. And I just froze there. I thought he was going to bite me in the face. But he put his head down, his tongue was going in and out. I guess he figured I wasn't a threat to him. And he put his head down, and he slithered across the defensive perimeter that we had, the center of the defensive perimeter, to where the lieutenant was on the other side. And so I immediately took my K-bar, and I started to go across. The lieutenant was facing outward. He didn't see me. It's probably fortunate. And the snake went right over his boot and disappeared down the slope. Lieutenant never even turned around. I wonder what he had thought if he would have seen me coming after him with my knife. Well, we made our way down to the river. And we crossed the river, and Bo, he signaled halt again, and he called up the lieutenant. And lieutenant, with his binoculars, looking around, he said, I found the helicopter. And so that was great. We were real pumped. We go up a little bit further, looking around, making sure the area was secure. We got closer, and it became evident that that was not our C-46. It was a helicopter, but from the French Indochina War 25 years earlier, had been shot down. The tires on the helicopter, when we got closer, were all collapsed. The rubber was all collapsed. The paint was on the outside, was nearly, worn away by the climate. We could still see the French markings on it, however. We poked around, looked on the inside, and it looked like an explosion had taken place on the inside. The instrument panel was completely wrecked, and there was no weapons on it at all. So what we figured was that the French had scuttled it themselves, perhaps crash landed and then scuttled the helicopter. So after poking around a little bit more, we left that alone. We continued along. And there was a stream that ran along the side of this area, and what a beautiful, beautiful place that was. There were, as we got further into the valley, it sort of opened up and it became park-like. There were flowers everywhere, and there wasn't that underbrush that we usually saw. It seemed to be cleared, it was a clear area, grasses and flowers, and orchids hanging from the trees, and the trees were, tall and overhead, But we can understand how the aerial guys, the planes, if they were doing a search, they couldn't see through that tall canopy, but we could see quite a ways with that, around us. Because again, it was really an open area. And after searching thoroughly through that entire area, we came to a structure in the middle of this field. It looked like a temple of some sort. Maybe it had there were stone columns, and the columns, when we got closer to it, were carved in an intricate pattern. There seemed to be some sort of a altar there, again with strange circular carvings on there. Perhaps the column supported a roof at one time. I don't know. It wasn't big, maybe 15 by 15, but this is such a lovely location. And later on, I suspect, I saw on National Geographic one time a temple from Angkor Wat, which had been the religion. The temples that were found in Cambodia and Laos, and if so, that maybe this was an outpost of one of their the Angkor Wat civilization. Well, Truman called the lieutenant over and said, "Look what I found! I found look at this!" And he started to dig at looked like a bowl in the ground, an upside down bowl in the ground. And I said, "Watch out, booby trapped, maybe booby trapped." And of course he stopped immediately. But the lieutenant kept on digging. He was like a little kid. He wanted to see what that was. Well, I got behind one of the stone columns, of the temple. I said to myself, geez, you're always warning other people, taking care of other people. When are they going to start taking care of you? But I wasn't too anxious to go digging around that. It could have been a grenade on top there, underneath that pot. You pull the pot up and you pull the pin on the grenade. But they kept digging. It's got the top off it, and it seemed like the top was of an urn. Maybe 3 foot wide, cylindrical urn buried in the ground, and it was filled with rice. So maybe the lieutenant thought maybe that was a store of food, and maybe he could find a store of ammunition as well. And sure enough, there was another glazed top, a few feet away, a couple yards away. and they pulled the top off of that. That turned out to have bones in it. So maybe it was a burial urn, and maybe that entire area was a cemetery. Well, we didn't find any more indications that of what that was. It could have been, they could have been there for hundreds of years. I don't know how long rice stays in that, viable in that climate. Well, we continued our search. We were dedicated to covering as much ground as possible and trying to make sure that there was that aircraft hadn't gone down in that valley. And so we covered it very well. Spent a couple more days in the bush there. Had no indication. So eventually we called in for an extraction, and we stopped at in a bamboo grove that to wait for the bird to come in to get us out. And the bamboo was like this thick, it was solid. You could barely move through it. But we figured, well, we're only going to be here for a little while, and then we'll get extracted, and it'll be a secure place to stay for a few minutes. So we hunkered down into that bamboo grove, and we heard eventually the choppers coming in. Wop, 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 wop. We're always glad to hear that noise. And the chopper started to come down, and then we heard on the radio, can't come down. We can't land. There's elephants on the LZ. Elephants on the LZ. What does that mean? Well, we looked at one another. Elephants on the LZ, and the helicopter pilot goes, "Don't worry. We'll chase them off." Well, I figured that they'd use the helicopter to chase them off, right? But instead, I heard this boom, a muffled boom of an M79 round going off. Well, a few seconds later, we heard this splintering of the bamboo sound coming right toward us. This huge, chaotic splintering of bamboo. And apparently the elephants were stampeding right toward us. And they passed by about 10, 15 feet to our left. We could have been trampled to death. Well, they passed, and we moved to the left, and it was like a bulldozer had gone through that bamboo. The stalks were just broken. Those guys had went through that like it was grass. So we followed that trail, into the open area, and the helicopter landed. And I was one of the first ones to get in. We always try. There was no water. Whoever was first got in the helicopter. I went around the side of the helicopter, and I jumped up the ramp, and there blocking me was our major. And he had a movie camera, and he was filming me and the rest of us as we tried to get into the helicopter. I tried to push. I didn't say anything. I tried to push him aside. I wanted to get to the windows so we could put our rifles out to protect ourselves in case we were attacked. Well, this guy's standing right in the middle of right in our way. And to the right of him was our top sergeant, that huge guy with the meat hook on his arm, and he was right by the major. I'd never seen either one of those guys in the bush before, or in the helicopter before. They were mainly in their hooches back at the base camp. But the major's filming away, and the top sergeant says something to him, and the major says, "Oh yeah, whatever." And out the ramp, the top sergeant goes with a K-bar in his hand. What in the world is going on now? So the helicopter's sitting there, you know, blades rotating, and we're waiting for the sergeant to come back in. And sure enough, after about 5 minutes, he comes back in, and he's dragging this head of a huge, I would say moose, a huge deer with you know, huge antlers, you know, sticking out, you know, 12-pronged buck or whatever that was, and he's dragging it into the helicopter. And blood's going all over the ramp. And finally we go to get taken out, and that head's rolling around inside the helicopter. Well, now I realize what had happened. The sergeant had taken his M79 when he saw people on the LZ, when he saw the elephants on the LZ, and he had seen this buck deer, and he decided to shoot the buck. And so when he shot the buck, it stampeded the elephants, and instead of stampeding them away from us, stampeded them toward us. So that was really something. So I got back to the hooch, and on my another mission gone, another mission over. I got back to the hooch, and I had kept in magic marker. I had written each one of the missions that I went on: Happy Valley, Charlie Ridge, Razorback Ridge, you know, on and on. And at the time, I had about 20 missions written on there, some of which were duplicates. You know, we went into Happy Valley probably 3 or 4 times. So there were some duplicates in there, but still, you know, I was getting my top of that Foot Locker that I had bought from the Gooks pretty well covered in missions. And I didn't know what to call this mission. And then finally I wrote the Garden of Eden on there, because it was such a beautiful place with its flowers and its animals, and it looked so pristine. We called it the garden. I called it the Garden of Eden. So, and that's what other guys started calling it too. So I named the piece of Vietnam. Well, we found out later that they did find that helicopter, and it had crashed and burned, and those guys who were killed. Everyone on the helicopter was killed. So that was Vietnam, 1969. If you like my stories, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.